Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome. Thanks everyone for joining us for the STARS College Network Night on Financial Aid. We want to just go ahead and get started with kind of talking a little bit about STARS, and then we'll get into kind of what we'll do for the overview of the presentation. The STARS College Network stands for the Small Town and Rural Student College Network. It's a consortium of 32 different colleges and universities from around the country. And what we do is we work together to really support and provide information and support for rural students and small town students to learn more about the college admission process, also about financial aid, and then ultimately enrolling at whatever institution is the best fit for you as a student. And so what we're going to do tonight is talk a little bit about the financial aid process. We'll talk about what financial aid is, how do you apply for financial aid, what kind of financial aid you might be able to receive from different types of institutions. And then finally, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and wrap up with a list of, a couple samplings of college financial aid awards. So you can kind of have an idea what some things might look like and how they might be presented differently based on the school that is sending it to you. So first, let's go ahead and we'll start off with our introductions. My name is Diane Fekinen. I'm Associate Director for Enrollment Management at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. Now pass it off to Rodana.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Rodina Osbrooks. I'm Senior Assistant Director for the University of Arkansas, which is located in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Julia Eischeid. I'm one of the Associate Directors within our Office of Admissions at the University of Arizona.
Great, thank you. And we'll also have Megan joining us shortly from Duke University as well. So we can go ahead and get started.
Yes, so I'll start us off here on really what the term of financial aid is. And it can really be a couple of different things, and of course we're going to be going over that. But financial aid is that bridge between your family's ability to pay for college and that a cost associated with obtaining it. So those are some of those examples that we're going to go through at the end there. But it can really be two things: need-based aid and merit aid. You can think financial aid as the broad umbrella term, and then the different types of financial aid are going to be the need-based, what you hear about scholarships or grants or loans. Those are those different types. But really, when someone says, what kind of financial aid do you need? That's going to be very different based on what your situation and scenario might be. And so on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about what those differences between the need-based and the merit-based are. So need-based is that financial need aspect. So if you've heard of the FAFSA, that is the free application for federal student aid, or the CSS profile, it can sometimes take into account tax returns based on, again, all those tax data information. And essentially it is, what can your family afford to help you pay for college? Now on the other side of that is going to be merit-based aid. Merit-based aid is based on achievements of academics. Maybe it's part of an organization or a club. So that's going to be those scholarships. So maybe you have a really good GPA or really good standardized test scores. We can potentially offer you some type of merit-based aid to help you pay for your education. So a little bit of differences on what is being considered for each type of those need-based or merit-based aid. And so some of those different sources are going to come from the federal government. So that is that FAFSA you can think of. State governments as well. There are some like different grants associated with every state. Then specifically with colleges and universities, that's where some of those offers are going to come out directly from us to kind of say, here's what we're offering you right now based on the information we have from you currently. And then of course, those private organizations. So maybe it is going to be, your local grocery store, or it could be a private bank loan, or it could be any number of things, maybe that organization that has a scholarship or grant or something that can be, again, supplemental to paying for your college education. And it's, again, not just tuition, but you also got to think about those personal expenses. So it's really everything encompassing as you're thinking about what has to be paid to go to college.
All right, thank you, Julia. Now we're going to talk about how to apply for financial aid. And there's several different things that you can apply for. We just kind of mentioned some of the different sources. And so there's going to be different forms, different applications that you're going to want to fill out. So these are just kind of some high level forms that you want to mention because you may come across these and just want you to be familiar with them. One is the free application for federal student aid. And it is just what it sounds like. It's a free application. And this is what you use to apply for aid, financial aid from the Office of U.S. Department of Education. So the U.S. Department of Education is the largest grantor of federal financial aid, period. They give about $1 billion every single year. And so this is an application that's going to be very important for students to fill out. And it could be that this is a requirement to apply for other things. I know here in the state of Arkansas, to apply for our state funded scholarships, they want you to fill out the FAFSA. So it's going to be something that you need to be thinking about and on your radar. There could be other institutional forms such as the CSS profile. Now, this may go a little bit more in depth. It may be asking a little bit deeper financial questions, but some institutions may use this to award some of their institutional financial aid or things that they can offer students as well. And then there are state-specific financial aid programs. Like I mentioned, in Arkansas, we have great programs for our Arkansas residents who are attending an Arkansas school. And so your own state may have that kind of different things. I know in Louisiana, it's called TOPS. I'm sure in every state, there's got some kind of really cute name on all the different types of scholarships and aid that they award for their residents. And there may be restrictions. You may only be able to use that in that state if you attend there. So be familiar with those because these are some really great ways to start that process of applying for different types of financial aid. All right, so we're going to go a little bit deeper into that free application for federal student aid or the FAFSA. So the FAFSA is an application that opens up every year around October 1st. So you would be applying in the fall for the next academic year that would start in fall. And so, for example, if you're a freshman, if you're a senior now that's going to be starting your freshman year, you would be completing the 26-27 FAFSA application. And that's going to be important to know. Make sure you're filling out the right one for the term that you're going to be going to school. And this is something that you're going to want to reapply every year because your circumstances can change. The FAFSA uses what they call prior year income. And so, for example, the 26-27 FAFSA is going to use income from 2024. And as we know, income can change, situations can change. And so you're going to want to fill out the FAFSA every single year, making sure you're filling out that correct year and sending that information to your school. The big thing to focus on is that this application is free. And that's actually literally the first word in the acronym is free. And so you never want to pay someone to fill out this application for you. And you definitely never want to pay someone to process this application. This is a free application. And unfortunately, there are some scams out there. So just make sure you're going to that website that is studentaid.gov to make sure you're filling out the right FAFSA form. Now, one thing, if you haven't started on your FAFSA, that's okay. Would encourage you to go ahead and start that process. But both you and your parent or contributors are going to need to create what they call a federal student aid ID or identification. So it's kind of shortened to be called an FSA ID. What this is just simply a login that you create. It's how you're going to sign your application electronically. And so both you and parent maybe in some situations, both parents may need to have their own FSA ID to be able to log into your application and then also to be able to sign it electronically. It's a very simple process to create your FSA ID for the first time. You just want to write it down somewhere, keep up with whatever you're using as your login, whether that's an email or if you create a username, that password, write down those security answer questions because you're going to have to use this maybe only about once a year. Same thing for your parent or contributors. Make sure they keep up with that. But the federal government has really made it simplified to be able to have your FSA ID, to be able to retrieve that if you need it. And I can testify just in the last few days, I have completed the FAFSA for my son that is a freshman in college right now. And it was really easy. I think they made some changes a couple years ago. And yeah, it was really simple and really easy. And so we're able to check that off of our list. Now, this application is going to calculate what they call your student aid index. Now, that may not tell you a whole lot about that, but the Office of Financial Aid at your institution is going to use that information to determine what type of federal financial aid and amounts that you can receive. Now, you can see this number on your confirmation page, so you might want to make a note of that, but it typically is going to kind of reflect how much you may contribute toward your education. Doesn't mean you will contribute that much. It just kind of gives them an idea of what this family situations and circumstances are and what you may be able to contribute to your education for that upcoming year. But they are going to use that to determine what types of federal and state financial aid that you can receive. So now we're going to talk about some of the different types of federal financial aid that you are applying for with this one application. So one is the Pell Grant. When you hear the word grant, kind of think good, because a grant means they're granting it to you based on your circumstances and situation. Pell Grant is a need-based. So that means not everyone is going to be eligible for a Pell Grant, but some students will based on their financial need. And you can receive Pell Grant up to an amount of a little over $7,000 for the academic year. So that amount, whatever you're eligible for, would be divided between the fall and the spring semester. There also is another grant called the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or FSEOG. That is also need-based, and it's campus-based, meaning the federal government will give each institution that participates in that program a certain amount of money to award to their students that have the highest need. And they can kind of set up their own parameters, so they can set up their own amount that they're going to award to their students. And it really is a first come, first serve. So once they have awarded that money and spent that money, that's what they have for that academic year. And so the amounts can range from up to $100 up to $4,000 for the academic year. The Pell Grant amount, whatever you're receiving, is going to be the same at each institution. If you're eligible for FSCOG, that can change a little bit because each institution may award a little bit of a different amount. But because it is first come, first serve, it is really good that when that FAFSA opens on October 1st, to go ahead and get that application out there and completed and sent to your school so that they can use that to calculate their aid. Now, there are a few other programs. There's a federal work-study program, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in detail on the next few slides. And then there are federal unsubsidized and subsidized loan programs. And there's also a federal plus loan program that is going to be for more the parent or graduate students. So let's talk a little bit about the student loan program. Sometimes student loans kind of get a bad rap, but in my opinion, if you're going to invest in something, investing in yourself and your education is a great thing to invest in. Just make sure you're being responsible, making smart choices so that investment does pay off in the long run. But there's two different types of federal student loans. There's the subsidized, which is a need-based subsidized loan. So not everyone qualifies for the subsidized, and the student is responsible for paying this back. So if you see loan, that is something that you do have to pay back. And the federal government, the subsidized is good because it pays the interest for you while you're in school or during your grace period. So that gives you a little bit of cost savings when you think about the lifetime of your loan. Now, versus the unsubsidized loan is not need-based. So Elon Musk could go back to school and take out an unsubsidized loan because it's not need-based. So everyone would have that ability as long as they have the eligibility requirements, which means filling out the FAFSA. You're an incoming freshman. There's no academic progress to be made yet, but that is part of that. But once again, it's a loan, so you're responsible for paying that. And there is interest that is accruing while you're in school. So you can pay that interest while you're in school, or you can say, I'm going to let that kind of build up and I'm going to put that into my loan amount when I start repayment. But just understand there's more interest on that unsubsidized loan. The Federal Plus loan is credit-based, so there is a credit check that happens in that process. And this is something that a parent can apply for, or a graduate student, and they're eligible and responsible for paying it back. There have been some changes with the Federal Plus loan. There's kind of been some talk about putting a cap on how much parents can borrow each academic year. But this is sometimes maybe a good combination where the student borrows either subsidized or unsubsidized or a little bit of both. And then maybe the parent comes in and helps with some Federal Plus loan to help finish out any cost that needs to be covered. Now, Federal Work Study Program, this is a program that is federal aid, but you have to work for it. And it's just simply kind of like having kind of a part-time job at the student's university. Now, there are some exceptions. This is earning federal government, so they provide the funding. So spots and jobs on your campus could be limited. There's certain ones that are work study jobs versus just a normal part-time job. And then you want to make sure that if you are eligible for work study, that you accept that. You do need to go by and apply for that job, interview for that job, be hired for the job. And it's also a need-based, so not everyone could be eligible for the work study job. The great part about this is there's no taxes held out on your pay. So they usually are, jobs that are usually minimum wage or they're pretty close. And the work study usually limits how many hours a week you can work. So you're not going to have a work study job where you're working 40 hours a week. Typically, there's somewhere between 10 and 20 hours a week, which is great because you're a student first, right? This is your part-time job and your full-time job is really going to school. The FSW earnings don't count toward your income on the FAFSA, so that's really good. So this is not going to penalize you in future years where you have to report any income because this, in a sense, was federal aid that you were applying for.
Awesome. And I think I just learned a bunch of stuff. So that was so informative. Hey, y'all, my name is Megan Rushing from Duke. Apologize for being late. I had a little technical glitch. So I'm happy to join y'all this evening, and thanks for joining us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the financial aid tools and resources that are really at your fingertips to use. And I would definitely encourage you all to sit down with a family member or a guardian parent and look at what these tools mean in your context, and then of course and see how they work with your college list. So the first one is My Intuition, and this is kind of like a rough estimate for a couple of schools as far as what your financial aid package will look like. It's quick and dirty, but it's a really good snapshot of what you are potentially considering. And then we have the net price calculator. And the net price calculator is definitely a little more specific for each college and university. For any school that accepts or has federal aid in their financial aid packages, they have to have the net price calculator. So, and another really interesting thing about the net price calculator is they're different for every single school. So if you are applying for financial aid, you would want to go to the net price calculator for each and every college or university that you're applying to. These are usually accessible on the admissions website or the financial aid website. And you will want to sit down and plug all of your numbers in. And then I always encourage students to take a screenshot of what your guesstimate might be. At Duke, what we do is you can appeal your financial aid offer. And if the net price calculator isn't fully aligned with your final awards letter, then you can appeal that offer. So it's just a good way to keep those. You might want to create a folder on your phone or an album on your phone or on your desktop for each net price calculator snapshot. But this will give you a really good idea of how much each college will cost because they calculate aid. They have different definitions for what need might mean. And so these are really good calculators to keep in mind. And then we also have some good resources for looking up scholarships. There's also a lot of resources, maybe even specific to your state. For instance, here in North Carolina, we have the College Foundation of North Carolina, and they also have really good resources. So FastWeb and RaiseMe are good places to look for additional scholarship opportunities as well. And then we mentioned the can we go back to the My Intuition? I think, is that the next one? Okay, great. So this is the My Intuition, the first calculator that I mentioned. This is the estimate that it will give you. And just to break down what different parts mean on this slide, I'm going to start with student employment because we talked about work study already tonight. So that would essentially mean a rough estimate of how much you would get paid if you have a job on campus. Again, always encourage students to work on campus. I actually started as a work study student in the admissions office, and then 20 years later, we're still here. So it's great professional experience. It's a good way to get to know your institution, and you can also give back. And the salaries have increased a little bit for student jobs, as from my understanding. So good. Also really nice if you're worried about transportation, just to get a job on campus. They're pretty accessible. And then next we have the student parent contribution. So that's how much you're expected to pay. And then the need-based scholarship. This is usually for grants or scholarships based on your SAI number. So that's a quick and dirty breakdown of that. For net price calculators, again, it shows the projected cost of each college. And so there are different factors broken down, whether a certain school might consider different assets that you have if you owned. I know sometimes, like if you work on a farm or if your family owns a farm, different schools look at that criteria differently, or if you own a business, or sometimes schools might look at your parents' retirement. So that's just something to keep in mind. And the net price calculator will inform you of which schools look at those different pieces of information. And again, the federal government requires this for all schools. So if you can't find the net price calculator for a certain school, I definitely encourage you to call the financial aid office. It is, again, required for all schools to have this. And then financial aid packages. So usually you'll receive your financial aid package with your admission letter. And this is can be really daunting because I know a lot of students do make their decisions based on their financial aid package. And finances are certainly part of the college decision. It's a huge investment. So do be aware of different deadlines in accepting your financial aid offers. And always, if you choose not to accept an offer, contact the school. In some cases, this also frees grants and scholarships up for other students. So if you choose to not go to another school, it's okay. Our feelings are not going to be hurt. But if you are able to pass on something, that frees up money for other students. So please do that in a timely manner. And then also there's different terms and different terminology that you'll encounter when looking at your financial aid package. So billed and unbilled are a really good example of this. Sometimes schools and financial aid offices will go ahead and calculate different expenses you might encounter during your time in college. And this could include books, transportation home for the semester, and other costs. So you might see things like billed and unbilled on your awards letter. Unbilled, basically, let's use the scenario of books. Typically, you would buy or purchase your books from either the bookstore on campus or maybe Amazon. There's also companies where they rent books out to students. So this wouldn't necessarily go through the university unless they have a plan for that. But on your awards letter, it might have an estimate of how much books cost a semester or a year. And then, of course, we talked about different kinds of scholarships or aid and grants that pop up on your awards letter. So grants, I always think of grants as free money. You don't have to pay it back. How great is that? Scholarships, those are usually based on merit or any kind of talent, whether you could be an athlete and receive some sort of scholarship. And then, of course, loans. The loans are the sad ones. You have to pay those back. But, of course, there's different types. There's the Stafford loan, which you just learned about. And most schools are loan free. And so that's also something just to be aware of. And there's different kinds of student loans. There's private loans, and then there's also ones granted through the federal government, which you also learned about today. And so it's important to sit down with your family, with your awards letter, and think about how much this is going to cost, like how much attending a certain college will be out of pocket. This is where maybe location comes into play. If it's far away, what does it look like to come home? But it's also important to check with different institutions. Sometimes they have the resources to help with different things as well, whether if it's books, paying for licenses for something online. So it's always important to look into that as well.
Great, thank you. And so now we're just going to take a look at a couple different financial aid awards. And so you can kind of get an idea. I think it's a good sampling of three very different types of institutions to show, as Megan was talking, those direct and indirect costs, and what a financial aid award might look like, and what are some things you'll want to make sure that you'll pay attention to as you're looking at these. So these are all very generic awards. So these are just estimates that were given. Each financial aid award is different. So we're not even comparing, like the same student would not receive this same financial aid award from these three schools. So these are very different, just to be used as examples, just to say ahead of time. So the first one we're going to look at is the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And so you can kind of see what's nice here that they've done is they've separated those direct and indirect costs. And so you'll see the tuition and fees and housing and meals are together. They've broken it separately into the fall and the spring semester. So you can, again, get an estimate on what your bill for each semester might look like. And then those indirect costs are the books and supplies, transportation, and personal expenses. Those personal expenses are just, shampoo, pizza on Friday night, Ubers around town, whatever it is that you might need while you're there as a student. So these are sort of estimates. So you also have to think about how you might live as a student, how much money you typically spend now. And so it's going to look a little bit differently for every student. And so one of the things that is on the lower section of this award here starts to add in, you see the costs up above, and then down below are the actual aid awards. So you'll see grants and scholarships. So this student has received the Bucky's Tuition Promise, the UW-Madison grant, and also the Dean's Excellence Scholarship. And so of the scholarships, so remember, grants are good, as we learned, is that that's money that you do not have to pay back. So you can see for a year, this student is estimated to receive $17,952 in grants or scholarships. And then down below, you'll see those loans, both the federal subsidized and unsubsidized. And so you might be able to see this difference in not all of your loan might be subsidized. Some of it might be unsubsidized. So it can be different, or you could have all of your loan amount be subsidized or unsubsidized. So you'll see it based differently on your financial need. And so you'll see the amount of gift aid that the student's receiving is the $17,952, and the amount of loans that the student is receiving is $12,508. And so you'll see for the total academic year what that cost breakdown looks like for what the actual student is going to be billed for, the estimated other expenses, and then also the aid that student is receiving. And so I think I was actually wrong on that first one, because you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the grants and scholarships is the $12,000. And so that's leaving the student with $17,952. And then the loans are $5,444, leaving the student with an out-of-pocket cost of $12,508. So that'll kind of give you an idea of what this particular institution's award might look like. To take a look at another one, we've got one from Yale here. So one unique thing about Yale is they are a no-loan institution. And so as we learned earlier, some schools both within STARS and outside of STARS are no loan institutions. And so you won't find a loan in their package. That's not to say that you can't take out a loan if you need one, but it is not included in their award. And they try to meet your financial need with their scholarships and other types of financial aid salary that they're awarding for the student. So again, here you'll see up at the top sort of those billed expenses, the tuition, housing and food, and then also an activity fee for the student. And then down below, you'll see are the books and supplies, personal expenses, and travel expenses. And again, as I mentioned with the personal expenses, travel expenses are going to be a little bit different for each student as well. And so if you are coming, if this student is from California and having to travel to Yale each semester, it's going to look a little bit differently than a student coming from, New Hampshire and going to Yale. And so the travel expenses are going to be a little bit different. So you want to take those into consideration. And then this student has received a $67,325 scholarship. And so the estimated cost minus the amount of the scale of the scholarship leaves the student with the remainder of $24,900 to pay. And then they've gone even a step further to say, this is the parents, so this is what we expect the parents to pay, and this is what the student share might look like. And so that's, from working, a summer job, maybe a small part-time job while you're a student in school. So you can kind of see it looks a little bit differently the way that they've kind of organized it, but it's still kind of providing you with the same information to help you kind of get an idea of what that actual out-of-pocket cost is going to be. And it's not necessarily that estimated cost of $24,900 is not as necessarily the amount that you are going to be billed for. They're including those indirect costs in that overall expense as well. So just to take that into consideration. And so this final one is from Case Western Reserve. And so you can see, again, we've kind of separated it similarly than the other two schools in terms of billable expenses and non-billable expenses. So you'll see up at the top are tuition and fees, and then housing and meals are together. And then lower than that, you'll see again, books and supplies, personal expenses, and transportation. So very similar to the other schools. But then you'll see the total cost of it, estimated cost of attendance. You'll see that the student has received both a CWRU grant and a university scholarship, both of those totaling just under $50,000. And then the student is also eligible for a loan of both subsidized and unsubsidized. And so you'll see over here on the other side, you can kind of, they've also been eligible for a federal work study position as well as a student. And so you can kind of see what that total cost looks like for each student. And so as you can see from these three, while they're very similar in like the information that they're providing for you, there is still some math that has to be kind of done on the family's part to kind of figure out, okay, so when I receive this bill, what is that going to look like for each semester? So you can kind of take all of these costs and then divide them in two and kind of get an idea of what that estimated bill might look like for you and your family. As we've talked about here before, kind of next steps, I think the first and most important thing that you can do is really have a real conversation with your family, anyone that might be contributing to your college education, and have a real conversation about what that looks like for you and your family. It's going to be different. Every single person that's probably on this webinar is going to have a different student aid index, as we learned from the FAFSA. So every financial aid award is going to look very, very different for each student. And so it's important to use those tools and use them with your family to try to get an idea of what college might cost for you and your family, but also see if that's a reality for you and your family, and see, if there has been, savings, or if you think there'll be financial aid there or things like that, and see, what is the dollar amount that you and your family can financially afford to pay for the schools that you're considering. You also, like I said, using those net price calculators and the My Intuition estimators. And like Megan said, keeping track of those to try to, it's kind of fun to play with at the beginning, but then you can so easily lose those numbers out of your head. And then you're like, what was that? I don't really remember. So keeping that in some way, shape, or form that you have access to kind of refer back to. And I think it's really important that as you are, it's a great time as you're filling out the FAFSA form, and then if you are required to do the CSS profile from any of your schools, get those W-2s and the tax returns all together. Get that information handy for these, as you'll need that for both those net price calculators and then also for the CSS profile as well. finally, you want to really stay on top of deadlines. So each school is going to be a little bit different in terms of what their deadline might look like. Both the FAFSA and the CSS profile are now available. So you can go right now and go and get your FSA ID, and then you will receive that in a couple days usually, and then you'll be able to go ahead and complete the FAFSA form. It shouldn't take more than 30 minutes for a family to fill out the FAFSA form. The CSS profile is a little bit more time consuming as far as how long it'll take you and your family to fill out, just because it's not importing that information like the FAFSA is. So you do have to kind of manually enter some of that information, but it's important because it might consider other things that the FAFSA doesn't take into consideration for you and your family for that particular institution. And then you really want to make sure you're staying, in contact with financial aid offices. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Most of us have email addresses that are readily available, phones that we're manning, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 kind of a thing. So don't hesitate to reach out, particularly for families that might not have, where the biological parents are divorced. There might be a non-custodial parent that is not in the picture, that is not contributing for the student. You might have a parent that has recently lost their job, or a parent that has recently died. There's all sorts of things that can go on. And as we learned, we're using the prior information. So 2014 might look very different than 2016. And so if that is the case for you and your family, again, reach out to those schools. And unfortunately, you really do have to reach out to each school individually and kind of go from there in terms of finding out what their policies are, forms that they might have available for you to use. And then I always recommend for students just to really be patient in the process as you're receiving those financial aid awards. It can be really easy to make assumptions about schools and what you might receive for financial aid. So I think it's great to just hold tight and really wait until you receive all of your financial aid awards, and to really see what is the best fit for you, both academically as a student, but also financially for you and your family. It's a big decision, and the more often you can have conversations around the dinner table, or in your car on your way to practice, whatever it might be, I think the better and more smoothly the whole process kind of goes. We've got a little bit of time left, and so I'll stop sharing my screen, and so we can go ahead and take any questions that there might be. I think we've answered a lot of them in kind of just the chat as we've been going. As we mentioned, there is going to be a Zoom. This is going to be uploaded to the STARS YouTube channel. So you will be able to watch that or share it with a family member if they weren't able to attend. So you can always view that anytime.
There's one about Duke for scholarships. So we do accept the National Merit Scholarship. At Duke, we have a very small amount of merit scholarships. So, and those aren't awarded until after you choose to enroll. So it's more like a cherry on top of a really awesome cake if you get a merit scholarship from Duke. So we always tell folks not to bank on getting that, but we do accept third-party scholarships. So that's where some of these websites come in handy.
And I just like to share, and maybe each of us want to share about National Merit Semifinalists and what our universities offer. So we do offer National Merit Semifinalist, one of our highest freshman merit-based scholarships. And then if they list us first on their National Merit application, we do bump that amount up a little bit. And then like Megan said, we also do accept the National Merit-based Scholarship Program. So if you get one through them, you can stack that on top of anything else that you're receiving from us as well.
Yeah, at the University of Arizona, I will say we have gone through a different enrollment and admissions application change this year, where we have moved to an early action, meaning some policies are changing with how we award scholarships. So if you have applied, if you are a senior and applied to the U of A, just keep an eye out for that acceptance come January, as we are still working out some of those finer details. But we do have some other perks with our W.A. Franke Honors College with any like scholars or those National Merit Semifinalists or finalists. So again, look out for those kinds of opportunities. Yeah, more to come on all types of scholarships from
Yeah, as well. Similarly for Case Western Reserve, we do award national merit scholarships. They range from generally from $500 to about $2,500, depending on the student's need and what else they've received in terms of scholarships. Our scholarships, everyone is considered for scholarships when they apply for admission for at least about 97% of our scholarships. And so there's no additional forms or anything like that that you have to fill out, and you'll be notified of that scholarship in your decision letter when you are notified of your admission. You can also, there are a small handful of outside scholarships that you can apply for, things that are more merit-based in terms of art scholarships, music scholarships, things like that. But for the general academic scholarships, you're automatically considered for those. Okay, looks like we've got a couple more questions. Do you want to talk about the Robertson Scholarship, Megan?
Happy to do so. So the Robertson Scholarship is a really amazing opportunity for students who attend either University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill or Duke. And it's kind of like a student exchange program in some way. So UNC students will spend a semester on Duke's campus and vice versa. And there's also a bus that connects the two universities because UNC is not too far from us. So we are rivals on the basketball court, but we also share the Robertson Scholarship and a Nobel Peace Prize. So we do love UNC in some ways, not all. But yeah, so the Robertson Scholarship, they have their own separate application process. As far as any kind of merit scholarship at Duke, your application for admission is your application for a scholarship, and those are shared with the Office of University Scholars or Fellows, and what we call them on campus is USIF. So the USIF office actually awards any kind of merit scholarship. The Robertson Scholarship Program, it's its own thing. So you do have to apply to them separately. And then generally speaking, they do several rounds of different rounds in their scholarship and admissions process or scholarship process, one being an in-person interview. And so those students they're pretty wonderful and amazing. And they're from all over the world and country. So it's a really fantastic partnership between us and UNC.
And Julia, we had a question. When is the right, or I'm sorry, I think I'm on the wrong one. When is the right time to start applying for financial aid, to start applying for colleges during your senior year?
I was going to say, start as soon as those applications open. I always like to tell students, have the fall semester be your application season, if you will, applying for colleges, applying for that FAFSA. If scholarships are open, start applying for them. Really, scholarships are going to be throughout your entire senior year, depending on when those open up. But really, as soon as applications open, we suggest applying. That way you're not worried or have to meet the deadlines, like you're way ahead of the game. And also some of those opportunities are those first come, first serve. So the faster you get those things in, the better, the more time you will have. And then your spring semester can really be that deciding time. Some of those offers, those financial packages will come out in the springtime, and that can be where you weigh those options with those family members or friends even. I know sometimes that could be a friend decision as well. But really the springtime is going to be a busy time anyways during your senior year. So don't be worrying about applying for things. That should be your deciding time frame. So really, as soon as they open up, start applying.
And usually the common application opens up August 1st. And so every other schools that might have their own application might be a little bit different, but generally that's when you can start doing that. And kind of similarly, when can you start applying for merit-based scholarships? This one does kind of vary a little bit from school to school. And if you're looking for an institutional scholarship, you'll want to check their financial aid websites. Oftentimes, there might be scholarships associated just for like an early action or early decision deadline. Others, it might be January 1st. So it does vary a little bit. And then you'll also find some outside scholarships. I know when my daughter was applying, there was a scholarship that didn't have a deadline until May. May, May 1st of our senior year. So they can really vary from any time during your senior year, those outside scholarships. And then for each school, you'll want to kind of check their website and see when the deadline is for merit-based scholarships. Okay. Do schools offer summer programs that not only provide students with a better sense of academic experience at your schools, but also provide those participating students the chance to apply for special early admission process? Nina, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I do. And then miss maybe things that, others want to make a comment and share. I know at the University of Arkansas, we have a program that's called Jumpstart, and it is for students that are in that summer before their senior year. Our application directly to us actually opens July 15th. So these students participate in Jumpstart. They spend a week on campus in Fayetteville, and they actually get a jumpstart on their application for admission. And even more than that, their scholarship application. So they actually get a chance to work with our staff, do their scholarship application, get feedback on their essay that they write for their freshman merit-based scholarship application. We actually have some other summer programs through our Walton College of Business where students can come and do those summer programs. And by participating in that summer program, then later, should they come to the University of Arkansas or apply for admission, there's actually some special scholarship that they can apply for. So I think every school is probably going to have some sort of summer program. Maybe even for younger years, we have an ACT Academy that we do each summer, a couple of weeks. And those are just great programs to, one, yes, get a college experience, to kind of test drive that college for a little bit. And I think it's a great way to kind of see if that college will be a good fit for them in the future.
And I think University of Chicago has a similar program to where they do have a program specifically for students from small town and rural areas, and they do offer a way that students can apply early for admission as well through that program. So a lot of programs do offer something similar for students if you're interested in attending those summer programs. For sure. Another question is applying early decision to a school worth it if we are going to need financial aid, or should we wait until regular decision? Does anybody?
I can answer that. So it really just depends on the school. Some schools do prioritize based on which round you're applying. In Duke's case, we do not. So we consider everyone's need, and we meet 100% demonstrated need for early decision and regular decision students. So as far as different opportunities at Duke, it's all the same for anyone who's applying. But some schools do prioritize early action or early admission, depending on where you're applying. And some of them also might award more merit scholarships, depending on when you're applying in the cycle.
Definitely. And finally, I think our last question is, are there ever any college programs for high school students that pay for traveling for students, as an example of fly-ins? There definitely are several STARS schools offer both rural and small town fly-ins for students. And so you can visit the STARS College Network website. And then under the events and programs, there's a link to where you can apply for various programs. And so they're usually offered at different times of the year for different colleges. So Case Western Reserve offered one this past October. And I think Brown, there was several other schools that have offered them as well. So they're usually offered kind of in the fall or in the spring. They could be for juniors or rising seniors, but on the STARS College website, there is an outline, and it'll give you the eligibility requirements and all those kinds of things that you can apply for. And those programs are kind of all expense paid. We do pay for the transportation for students to get to our campuses, and then provide all the housing and meals while they're visiting the campus as well. And a lot of times, especially for the STARS programs, we'll coordinate together. And so you might, be at, Arkansas, but you might have another school there representing their STARS institution, just to tell you a little bit more about their school, and give you some other insights as to various different colleges. Because overall, what we really want to do is help students through the college and financial aid process, and really help them find the best school, the best fit for them. And so that's kind of what we're interested in doing, and why we're all a part of this consortium. I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We really appreciate everybody attending and asking the questions. They were great questions. Please feel free to reach out to any of us on our college admission websites or through the Stars College Network website. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.